Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on Masechtas Metzia daf Samach Dalid. We're going to begin on Samach Gimel Mebez by the two dots at the bottom. The Omer Rav Nachman Haiman de Ozif Pshite Mechavre. If you have a person who borrows coins from his friend, V'yashkach be turfaina, and it turns out that there was more money that was given to him. Notice he gave you more than the loan. So presumably what this means is that it was done by mistake. Says Rashi, Zesha Kibel Hamois must have Yosim Amashi Armil Chavero. So he asked him, could I borrow $10? And ended up saying he gave you 20. So Ibichdei Shahadas Toya Bechayav Hadurile. So it depends. Says Rashi, if let's say it was a mistake, you have to give it back. Says Rashi, Iko Memer let's say the lender made a mistake in counting the amount of money, and he didn't realize, so he had to give back that money. Otherwise, if presumably he did know about it, maybe the difference was just considered like a gift. What does that mean? His consent or knowledge about the mistake. As we continue to Samach Daled Aleph, it's Bi'isuryasa v'chum shayasa. Says Rashi, Im yesh l'chalkam l'mois ha'idvas. If you divide it up, l'hoitzian asara o hey 10 or 5 ein echad o shnaim oidvois. Now 1 or 2 is extra. She'ein bois l'chal hey, and it doesn't come in the category of 5. Yesh loimer shetoi b'cheshboinai im isurasa ninhu. So maybe he made a mistake in that situation. So it's a possibility of how we can understand that a mistake was made. If you're a person, says Rashi, the person gave it to you is Adam Kashahu. He typically doesn't, not the nicest guy in the world. So in that situation, what's the din? Because why should we make an assumption that he gave you as a gift as we actually know him to not be so generous? Amalei Dilma Migzal Gazle, maybe it was stolen. Says Rashi, Dilma Migzal Gazle Ze Yomim Ram, was stolen many days. Says Yada, you didn't know about it. Hashda Mo Libo Hashivoi. Notice maybe this guy actually was a ganav. Maybe he stole money from you. And you're right, he doesn't like giving gifts, but he doesn't want to keep money that doesn't belong to him. And therefore, what actually happened, possibly, is that this person is holding on to this money to find the opportunity to give you the money back which he stole. And therefore, for that reason, you can still assume that you can keep it. The Amalei B'cheshim, he just swallowed it up. Perhaps he didn't even want you to know that he stole it or anything like that, and therefore you can keep it. Asanya, if you stole and then you somehow just give it to him, so you did return the gzela. Now this person may have to ask machila, but you're yatsa the fact that it was given. You no longer you have to worry that and in fact this item was not returned. In fact, halachically you did return it. Again, maybe that's not the best way of returning an object, but nonetheless, that is the situation here. Okay. V'i inish dasim alma to shakel v'tari b'hadei mai. So what if you're dealing with someone who really you didn't have much interaction with? So if that's the case, and he also has this reputation of not being so kind, so why would we assume that he stole from you? You never really met him in your life. Maybe someone else stole. So maybe he knows a second guy. The other guy stole, even though there's no way this guy stole from me. I've never seen him in my life. But maybe someone else stole, and since he knew that he was going to lend you money, so therefore he asked if you could pay him back during this way. Amar Kahana Havia Yasivna B'Shili Pirki Darav. So we're sitting in this parak, as Rashi Kishim Asayim Lidrash, when he was finishing his drasha. Ba'asi v'loi shemati techilas tvarav. I heard the end, I didn't hear the beginning. V'shamis dekaimer kari kari, and I kept hearing him saying the words kari kari, which has to do with diluyin, He kept talking about gourds, pumpkins. What was he talking about? I'm not sure what he was talking about again because I missed the beginning part. All I heard was the pumpkin part. Busted to come Rav, after when Rav got up, I'm my Rav. What exactly are you saying when you kept saying pumpkins? This is what Rav said. Let's say a person is going to buy gourds to gardeners. And in order to be able to buy these gourds, it would be 10 for a b'nei zarta, which is a zeres is the measurement like this from the thumb to the small finger. So in this situation, this was the size of that which you were going to be getting, which is a b'nei zarta. The Yomi havinalach b'nei garmida. He says, I'll give you later a larger gourd. Says Rashi, ama. I'll give you, apparently for the same price, a larger gourd. So that shouldn't work because it's a prepayment, which looks like ribis. So isnu shari. The truth is, it depends. If there were these large gourds, then it's allowed. Leisnu aser. If they're not around, then it's aser because of ribis. So pshita. So again, we've said this before that the whole issue of prepayment is dafka if the item isn't around at the time of the arrangement. So madatema, you would think kivandim and karabu, since they grow on their own. So maybe it's possible shaper damikamashman, even if they were not around while they were small. They were not big, but they were small. But those small and the big ones weren't around, but the small ones are around. But since the small ones are going to grow, it's ki'ilu like you acquired the small ones, and therefore the fact that they grew like your own rishus, and therefore it'd be okay. Come on, ki haitana. It's like the following Tana Sanya. A person is about to milk his goats, or to shear the sheep wool, es kavarto, or to take out the honey from the honeycombs. So he encounters his friend, and he says to him, that which your goats will produce, that milk which is going to come out, sell me that milk. So, or for that matter, whatever you're going to shear from these sheep, sell to you. They want to engage in a business transaction with the honey that you will take out. So the din is mutter, says Rashi, of hefsid v'sachar. So when you did this, you accepted upon yourself, the buyer did, the risks, the potential risk. It's a risk as he may take a loss. So therefore it's not considered ribis, like he prepaid now for the stuff later on. Because what it's possible, even though maybe he could gain, he could also lose. Hilkach says Rashi, even if it turns out there's more milk or whatnot, it's not considered to be like agarnater, prepayment, because it was even less, it would be the same thing. In other words, if we can establish that there's a potential loss, then we don't know for sure that this person is going to stand to gain, then we don't say it's like ribis. No, it's mutter. He says, Mashi easy chalbos kach v'kach machal. If he says a specific amount, so or Mashi rechaylai geisis kach v'kach machal Mashi kivarti roide kach v'kach machal aser. V'afal gadu memela karavu. Even though it comes about on its own, givan deleisnehu by he shaita, since it's not here at this time, aser, as this prepayment is considered to be as ribis, and because the way that you stipulated it, you said it as though there will not be any potential risk on your part, so therefore it's aser. Some says no, pufakert. The very fact that it comes, like for example, these pumpkins, these gourds that they're going to grow, they're growing by themselves, so there's no issue because it's like you own those gourds while they were small, and therefore now that you get a big one, so therefore it's like it grew in your rishus, and therefore it's not like you're getting a payment and a form of ribis. I was then kach aser. We see it's aser. The hasam lamine karavu. Over there, when we're dealing, let's say, with a milk, it's not growing on its own. The shakile lahai v'asya achrina beduchte. Hachab over here, mina karavu. It's the same gourd. The chi shakli lahai v'asya achrina beduchte. It's not like something else is coming in its stead. Says Rashi, chalav habalachazman. When it comes to milk, eino gadel mikoy chalav shahayi bebehema b'shas mecher. That milk is new milk. It's not coming because of the milk that was already there. It's like producing more milk, but it's not connected to the original milk. When it comes to, again, the pumpkins, these gourds, when they were small, it's the same gourd. It just grew. And therefore, because of that, that's the reason why maybe we could be more mako when it comes to the case of the gourds as opposed to the case of the milk. Question 5. So as we said, b'stama mutter. If you just said it plainly, you accept it upon the potential risk factor. So therefore, it's not like ribis. Kach l'kach aser. If you're specific, so therefore, because you prepaid and it's only to stand to gain, so therefore it is going to be aser. Let's see. TA 20. So this may be a little bit more. So it's really the same question. TA 20. So if you said stam, mashi easy chalvos mutter, shahoy kibul love gam hefset. However, if you say kach l'kach, also to have a sachar hamatanas mois. So again, that's really the exact same question. Fine. TB 21. Hi, man, do you have zuzi legina akroi for these gourds? Azli asara karile b'nei zerasa, smaller ones. V'yomu yibin alach v'yachachach b'nei garmi, the larger ones. So what did it say over here? Ha'im mutter lasos kain. So I wrote im yesh akroi mutter. If there's pumpkins there, it's mutter. Ula yomim ze akroi katan achshav v'heim gedolim karm gedolim v'lo kamo hacholav shel izim. Okay. So again, it's all totally, if they're there, yes. If not, not. So that's what we end up saying is really the key point, which is we've been saying throughout, that if it is here, let's just make sure I get the language over here. Isnahu shari leisnahu aser. Okay, let's continue. Right in the Gemara. So the Gemara says as follows. Lo yasachrina beduchte. Amar Rabbi, shari leil inishal meimer leil chavre. A person is allowed to say to his friend, Helach arba zuze. I'm going to prepay for this wine 4 zuz, a chavisa de chamer, again for this barrel of wine. I tokva b'rshusach. If it spoils in your rishus, says Rashi, im machmetzas. I yakra. I zila b'rshusi. If it goes up or down, it'll be k'il like it's in my rishus. So again, because it's not a certain gain for the lokeach, so therefore it's not considered to be like ribis. It's only an issue of prepayment of agranatar, dafka in a situation where there is only to gain. But if there's a potential loss, so then we don't say it's an issue. Rav Shirabi Labaya, as we continue to Samach Talmud Beis, Hai Karov Wasachav Urachoi Kohefsetu. This doesn't seem to be much of a loss over here. There's a greater chance of a gain and less of a chance of a loss because he already threw out the possibility of it spoiling. Says Rashi, Rachel Hefsed, Im Tokfo Loi Mikabole. He's not accepting it if it's vinegary, if it spoils. But Tanya Bapirkin, Karvo Sacha, Rachel Hefsed, Russia, the Shakal Ribis. It's apparently the Gemara says later on that it's still a ribis. So how is this acceptable? Summer Lake, Hivana Mikabole Zula. Since he accepted if it goes down, Karvazel. No, it's considered to be like equal. All right. Says the next submission. Says the Masnisan. Hamavis Chaveroi, a person lends money to his friend, and obviously expects to be paid back. So Lo Yoder B'Chatzeru Chinam. You, the lender, cannot live in his property for free. because you're supposed to apparently be paying rent, and therefore it's a form of ribis. And let's say even if you do want to rent it out and say, I'll pay, but you're going to pay less money, that's also a problem because it's ribis. If you have to pay the same amount, whatever the rent was. Says the Gemara, now we have learned in Bava Kama that if someone lives in someone else's property without their consent, you do not have to pay. You don't have to pay. So the question is, so why would it be a form of ribis if you can just be living in someone else's property? Hilvahu, but if you lend that person money, this is just a stam person. But now, if you actually are the malva, in that situation, since you're the malva, we're more concerned of ribis issues, so therefore you do have to pay rent. So my kamash one tanina. Where do you learn this? Ribis. That's beferish our Mishnah. So our Mishnah tells us beferish that you can't live in his property for free. Now even masnisan, if we only had our Mishnah, you would think the only time he can't be there is if it's a property which was supposed to be rented out. The lova, the borrower, is supposed to rent out this property and make money off of it. And we're dealing with a person, a malva, who actually needs a place to live. So in that situation, zenehena, this guy's getting hana over here, and because the malva is there, and we find that the loiva is losing out. So it's zenehena is a chaser. Let's say the lova wasn't planning on renting out this property. It was not normally rented out. And this malva really doesn't need a place to live anyway. He has another beautiful house. So in this case, you would think it's not a big deal if he would live there, because this guy is not really getting hana. That even in that situation, it says Rashi, the michsakaribis. It still looks like ribis. Yesh loimer, yesh lilmoin mekan. We can learn out from here. Shaser halvais al bias v'loderbo afilu benachyasa. You cannot take your property and give it to this guy and deduct the rent. In other words, if I owe $10,000, I say, you know what? You can live in my property. My rent is Rent I usually charge $2,000, so you can live for 5 months. So every single month you will be deducted. The hasim zim the loy shakel beimidi v'vil hachim menachile aval kan zenehena tamid ve'en kan safek nimsa soicher b'pachos. So it's interesting. According to this, it says you cannot deduct from rent connected the loan. Question 6. It says, Maishna, why, when it comes to a mashkain of a kerem or a field, that you are allowed to deduct? So in other words, if the lender holds onto your vineyard and he starts eating the grapes or whatever, so it can be deducted from the price. However, not when it comes to renting, living in someone's property, that amount that's owed just keeps getting deducted. So this is what Rashi said. The hasam over there is zimna delay shakol midi. It's possible he may not take anything. Just because you give him a kerem or a sod, that doesn't mean he's actually going to use it. So you can deduct it. You have like a kaina as a paras al suffix. So it's like you're acquiring it, but it's a doubt whether you're going to eat them. Of a bias or olam nehenahu. If he's living in your house, he's definitely getting hana. And therefore, because there's a chance that it may be for less than the proper amount, so therefore we are more strict. Okay, that was question 6. All right, let's continue. So that's the kamashmon, that's the chiddush, that even in a situation where we're dealing with a chatzir deloy kamla agra, the loiva wasn't going to rent it out anyway. So who cares? Let him live there. And this other guy, the malva, has another property. Nonetheless, he can't live there. Even though, as we said, typically you don't have to pay for the rent in that situation. However, but if you do live in my chutzner and you owe and I owe you money, then in that case you have to pay for it. So Mandi Aimer Hilavo, the one who says the case of a lending koshkein halveni. Certainly, if we're talking about halveni, in other words, that you made up before hand to lend the money and then rent it out. But if it was pre-intended, not my time, since originally when the loan came out, it wasn't for the purpose of living there, so therefore in that situation it's not considered to be a problem. So it's possible that the difference is it was, it says Rashi, so I'm gonna lend you money on condition that you let me live there. So as you made up already, the stipulation from before is different than you already have a loan and then only afterwards you decide, you know what, maybe I could live there and deduct the rent. So there could be a distinction between those two. Okay. So Rabbi, again, because since it wasn't totally on the rental, so therefore we're not as concerned that maybe this person's going to get a better deal on the rental, etc., and therefore be ribus. Rabbi Yosef bar Chama tokif avde the inshi the masik b'hu zuzi. He used to grab hold onto the avadim, then people owed him money. Ve'avid b'hu avidta, and he made these avadim of the borrowers. He would have them work for him. Amar Rabbi Berei, my Tabin Marhachi, why'd you do this? I'm only Rav Nachman severely. I hold like him. Dear Rav Nachman, Avda, servant, Naham Kresi Shavi, the bread in the stomach is not worth it. In other words, you're not even really gaining anything, because I had to feed him while he worked, but the truth is, I'm not really gaining much anyway. So when did he say that therefore it's not ribis, because I'm actually helping this guy out. I'm giving him food and feeding his Eved when the Eved really doesn't really produce the amount even that he eats. Yeah, but when does Rav Nachman say that? Going the Ari Avde de Mirake Bekubi. Maybe we're talking about this particular type of Eved. His name was Ari Avde, that was his name, that he used to dance in the taverns, says Rashi. Leitzan Haya. He was a leitz. He was a scoffer, Marakid Bechenvias Lishtas Yain. He was a drunkard. So that's when he's talking about that type of an Eved. But Avdi Achrini Miyamar, when it comes to any other Eved, no, they actually work a lot more than they eat, and therefore you shouldn't be allowed to do it. Rav Daniel bar Rav Katina Amar. Rav severely, I hold like him. That if you grab hold onto an Eved and you do work for him, potter. Why? As we said, as we continue in Samachem and Aleph, Denichale Deloy Nistre Avde, says Rashi, it's better that this Eved should just be sitting around doing nothing. So there, if you have him sitting around doing nothing, he's going to get weak. And therefore, the fact that I had him work for me when he had nothing else to do, so I was actually doing the Lova a favor because now his Eved is strong. That's only if there was no monies that were owed. Over here, because there's monies that were owed, so the problem is that you're using it looks like you're taking ribis. And therefore, you shouldn't have taken this Eved. As we said, even though technically you could stay in someone else's property and no one cares because again, it's the guy's not getting rent anyway. However, Amarle Hadri says, you're right, I'm going to retract, I didn't realize. Because we do see a difference, a stam person doing something, and when it comes to a loan. So even though it's true, maybe when it comes to an Eved, if you would do someone else's Eved, you'd be putter, you didn't do anything, a violation. But over here, since there's a din of a loan, it looks like ribis, and therefore becomes problematic. Rabbi, Haiman Damasik Zuzi to Rabiso B'chabre, a person who was collecting ribis from his friend, the Ka'azli Chite Arbor Garive, Bezuzah Bashuka, and wheat was 4 measures for zuz in the marketplace. V'yoyble ihu chamisha. Instead, he gave him not 4, but he gave him 5. Kimaf kinan mine arba. When he returns the 4, mafkinan mine, he only has to return the 4, not the 5th. Idach, the 5th, uzlehu deka moizel gabe. It's considered like though it's a gift to him. Rabba omer chamisha mafkinan mine. No, we actually will take all 5. Dimikar b'taris rabiyasa asul because it was originally given as ribis, and therefore the 5th one also is not considered as a gift. Yom Rabbi, Haiman demasik arba zuze de Rabbi Asa. Let's say you have again a person who is who has four zuz of ribis the pachaber in his friend's hand, v'yoivle glima, and he gave him a cloak that is worth that amount, which is worth 4 zuz, begavayu. So kimaf kinamine arba mafkinamine. We take away the 4 that was the ribis, glima mafkinamine, not the coat. Rabbi Omer glima mafkinamine, also the coat. My time ki heichad lamer glima machasti, that this coat that's covering him up, vikoi glima to Rabbi Yasahu. We don't want people to start saying and speaking negatively. This is a coat that came from ribis. Omer Rabbi Haiman demasik treyasa zuzi de Rabbi Yasa b'chavre. A person had 12 zuz of ribis in his friend. The agrele chatzar, and he leased out a courtyard, a property, to mitagra basara, and it was 10. In other words, it was 10 instead of 12. But instead he rented it out to him for 12. The property is really 10, but instead he rented it out for 12, because that's how much was the 12. So kimaf kinamine tres maf kinamine, because it was ribis, you take away the 12. Why can't the guy say, 1 second, ki agra, when I rented this out, hachi de havika mishtarshili, this is what I'd be gaining anyway. Hashlo mishtarshili, now that I'm not gaining, kid agri kuliyalma who diagarna, I'm paying more than the others. The reality is that you accepted the rental at 12 zuz, and therefore that is that. Okay, let's see. We're going to obviously stop there. Let's see if there is another question over here. No. Adkan.